Okay, guys, this session is being recorded, brought to you by the Association for Renewable Energy Practitioners. We did have the ECB participate with the marketing of the event. So we've got quite a few guys that are signed in. Some would be signed in as consumers of PV products. Some would be signed in as installers. And I would imagine that we would have quite a few guys that are offering competing financing products. What I would like to extend an invitation to other organizations offering finance. You're welcome to contact me and we can see if we can provide the industry with a slightly broader picture of other financing solutions that are also available. I know that FNB only services a certain portion of financing that's done in industry, and Kyle would be able to confirm that for us shortly. He's going to give us a lot more information around how FNB views risk within solar PV plants and how that can be assessed. I am going to just talk about what AREP is. And then we are going to give the floor to Kyle. And after Kyle has presented on the FNB product, I'm going to quickly talk about the P4 platform and the pros and cons to such a platform. What is it? How does it work? And then we will have a Q&A after each session. So once Kyle has presented, we'll open the floor for questions and or comments. So who or what is AREP? So AREP is the Association for Renewable Energy Practitioners. We particularly service the small scale renewable energy sector. So I would imagine any system smaller than about 5 megawatts in size. I know 5 megawatts is not a small system by any means, but we'll find that installers that do 500 kilowatt systems also get involved in larger projects. So you will find installers doing a 500 kilowatt project also participating in systems larger than 1 meg in size. So we do service the sector up until about 5 megawatts in size. The association took about 3 years to develop. There are lots of other industry bodies and lots of other associations available in South Africa. AREP services specifically the renewable energy sector. We've got a P4 platform, that's a quality assurance platform. And the P4 platform has taken about 7 years to develop. So there's a lot of time and effort that has gone into developing the platform and making the platform available to installers. The platform itself has been developed specifically for the South African market. So the platform really caters to local technology and the local trading environment. We'll find that the primary interest of AREP members are solar PV technologies, and we are also looking at other renewable energy technologies, following the development of the technologies locally, and trying to understand how we can best service the needs of guys within those technologies. Currently, we have more than 500 members. Guys, the association is growing at a rapid rate. So it's amazing to see the interest in industry. It's amazing to see the participation in these events. And just if we look at the number of guys that are participating today in this webinar, we've got more than 240 guys signed in. In fact, 272 guys that are signed into this webinar at the moment. The database, the AREP database, consists of more than 10,000 contacts. And I think that more or less brings me to the end of my presentation. I'll carry on with the rest of the slides once we've gone through Kyle's presentation. Kyle, are you there?
I am, Coral, thanks. Let me quickly just share this quick presentation and then let's get it all kicked off. All right, I'm going to have to just log off and log back in. I'm just getting a bit of a security question here. I'm going to have to just get out of Zoom and just get back in. Coral, I'll be back in a couple of minutes.
Okay, excellent. Thanks, Kyle. That's 100%. While we are waiting for Kyle, I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to do exactly what I said I was going to do once Kyle has finished his presentation. And seeing that we are waiting for Kyle to sign back in, I am quickly going to have a look at the next slide. Guys, we've got one of the fastest growing sectors in South Africa. The slide that we see on the screen represents some of the people that are currently being trained or people that have an interest in the solar sector. If we look at the occupation section, so this is a whiteboard, a photograph of a whiteboard, and what it really covers is it covers the number and type of people that join in some of the training sessions that are presented throughout the country. So, who is approaching the market? We've got, according to that whiteboard, 14 entrepreneurs. I always put entrepreneur / hustler, because an entrepreneur is usually a guy that does whatever he needs to do for as a source of income. And we find a lot of guys that are busy approaching the solar sector. And this, of course, is both good and bad. It's good from a market or sector growth point of view, but it's bad because we're getting a lot of guys coming into the market that have absolutely no knowledge of solar technology, and they are doing installations without necessarily being properly trained. This creates opportunities in the market, but it also causes a lot of upset and causes a lot of issues, because you could have a lot of users buying products from some of these entrepreneurs or newfound entrepreneurs who actually have no idea what they're doing. There are, of course, some of them that do, and they invest a lot of time and money, but you will always have people rushing or flooding a market where there's a demand if some of the other sectors are busy dying down. Out of this group of 31 guys that attended the training, 5 were electricians, 3 were technicians, 2 engineers, farmer, salesman, builder, software developer, and a mine captain. So of the 31 guys, only 3 had previous solar experience. 7 almost had experience. So in our training sessions, a guy that almost has experience is a guy that's worked with a single battery, small charge controller, and 1 or 2 panels. So guys that almost have experience are guys that have played around with solar on gate motors, electric fences, or camera systems. And 21 guys out of this 31 group had absolutely no clue, no experience, and some of them had very little electrical knowledge. And in fact, in the next section, you'll see that it shows, and I don't know if that's Kyle that has now managed to come back into the room. Kyle, if it's you, I will escalate you to the panel in a minute. Where I am in the slide at the moment, only 10 had adequate electrical knowledge. 15 had little electrical knowledge, and 6 of the guys had absolutely no knowledge. So this could be both good and bad. I think if there were emoticons being shared, I think there were a couple of guys that would have the emoji with an open mouth right at this point. But there are lots of guys who do not need electrical knowledge to be part of the solar sector. And those guys are typically sales guys. So you do find you do find sales guys going around and identifying the interest of potential customers. And then once the customer has shown an interest, the customer is then introduced to a technical partner. So for guys to approach the industry and to have absolutely no electrical knowledge is not a major problem, provided that the guy fulfill either an administration function or a sales function within the sector. I want to just quickly see where Kyle is. I'm sure Kyle has... Kyle, you're back.
I am back, Carl.
Oh, excellent. Thank you very much. I think what I'm going to do is I'm done with presenting this slide over here. Can I give you the floor? Are you good to present?
I am good to present. Yeah, I'll share screen and we can crack on.
Okay, so I'll stop sharing the screen and you are welcome to take over, and then I'll carry on the presentation when you want to. Excellent.
All right, let me quickly just make this full screen and then we can take it from there. All right, I just want to thank everyone, particularly AREP, Carl, thanks for setting this up, and thank everyone, all of you, for signing in. I think a session like this is valuable in the time that we've got, but we are aware that everyone's got kids at home. Not everyone, but a lot of people have kids at home and other responsibilities. So thank you for taking the time to sign in on this session. So just to start off, I'd like to introduce myself. I'm Kyle Durham. I look after alternative energy solutions for FNB business, and a little bit of context on alternative energy solutions is it's an area in the bank that we specifically look at developing and assisting our customers with solutions for the challenges of energy certainty and particularly cost, which solar plant funding fits really, really nicely into. So our customers are continually challenged in the space, and we really believe in this technology. And for this presentation, I'd like to take us through the agenda as a start. It's not going to be a very formal session. I want to keep it Q&A and keep it interactive. So you're more than welcome to use that Q&A box, and we keep chatting through this. And I'd like to answer as many questions to all the participants. We've got a lot that have signed in. So the first part I want to talk about is FirstRand. Where does FirstRand fit into the whole into this market? FirstRand as a bank is a very large entity. It's the largest bank by market cap in South Africa. And how do we tackle the renewable energy market across all our brands? And then I would like to give some context from my perspective, from FNB business's perspective, and that's and we'll talk about the nature of solar plants as an asset, how we're approaching the funding of them, how the supplier due diligence that Carl now started talking about ties into that, what our offering to our customers looks like, and then how our customers can be assisted in terms of if you are a supplier in this market, an installer, an EPC, or you're an FNB customer looking for a solution, how you can get in touch and take a look. So first, as I said, we're going to start talking about FirstRand as a bank, and there's some there's a couple of broad brands that are out in the market that you'll know about, and the first one is Rand Merchant Bank, the second part of the name FirstRand. And Rand Merchant Bank is our commercial and industrial, not commercial, corporate and investment bank, our CIB, and they're very, very much focused on utility scale installations. These are installations that have project sizes above 100 million Rand, and the debt structure is very different depending on the project, and depending on who's actually involved. Also, the term on these transactions are very project dependent and dependent on who the offtake is. These are projects within South Africa and across Africa as well. So the FirstRand group, particularly RMB, is a very important part of the group because it looks after all our JSE listed businesses and these large utility scale projects. Then we've got the FNB brand, and you'll know the FNB brand very well as part of the retail arm. and obviously for business banking. So FNB business banking is where I fit in, and that is our commercial and industrial sector. So in terms of solar, this is where we focused on commercial and industrial, and we go all the way down to 250,000 rand installations and all the way up to 50 million rand installations or projects that are funded by a term loan product with a term of up to 10 years, depending on the project size and depending on the needs of our customer. Then FNB's got the retail arm. That's our retail bank. It's typically our residential sector when we talk solar. And that, unfortunately, is where we are lagging behind, and I'll be completely frank. In terms of residential offering, we do not have a dedicated solar product, although there's some work that we're doing in this space. There's nothing at market level yet. But currently, the way these solar plants are being funded is via home loan, and it's still a very, very strong way of funding a residential size solar installation. The term here is very much matched to the home loan, and if you've got 10 years, for example, left on your home loan, it's best to probably match the solar plant to that term. This is often a very cost-effective way of funding a solar plant, particularly in the residential space. And then I'd like to introduce you to First Fund. So some of you out in the audience potentially could have seen some of the information that's been put out in market at the moment from a First Fund perspective. First Fund is not part of the FirstRand Group. It was funded by RMB as a specialized lender for power purchase agreements. It's developed a very, very strong value proposition in the space, and it's very capable of funding into PPAs, and it's a very unique way of funding PPAs that is very different to the way it's currently done in South Africa. It's got a focus for commercial and industrial PPA projects, and it's there to bridge the gap between what FNB is offering and what Rand Merchant Bank is offering. So the ideal pipeline that First Fund is looking for is around about 50 million Rand in terms of overall projects. So not per project, but if you've got a pipeline or a project portfolio of 50 million Rand, First Fund on PPA structure, it is something that can definitely be looked at. That can be dropped slightly depending on the PPA structure, depending on the asset and that. But if there's any questions, you're more than welcome to ask me on First Fund. Pop me a mail and we'll connect the dots there for you. The debt structure is also various depending on the asset class, but the term depends again on who the EPC is, but can be funded up to 12 years. So very, very excited about what First Fund is putting into the market. So the next part is, I think, let's take a look at some of those Q&A questions. I see a couple. So the one that I've seen now is, does FNB do cross-border finance in South Africa? So South Africa is our key focus area at the moment. We are rolling out this thinking to the rest of our Africa subsidiaries. We've got Mozambique, Namibia, Botswana, Ghana, etc. So there's a couple of our subsidiaries in FNB that will be linking along this thinking. So it is going out into Africa, but each territory, that is offered has its own regulatory challenges, and we have to tackle each one based on what the regulations look like. So the next part of my slide it talks specifically to funding the asset. And when we look at funding a solar plant, you'll know as installers, if you've looked at it, created your quotations, you'll know that a large part of your quote includes, things like labor and irrecoverable items. We're looking at things like mounting brackets that are very specific to a site, wiring, etc. So that's the first challenge, is we're dealing with a quotation that's not just just equipment, but actually is more than equipment, because there's a labor component and construction cost added to it. Then from a collateral perspective, if we add on that solar plants are not designed for easy removal. They're not the easiest thing to take off the roof safely. without damage to the equipment. And there's stories, if you chat to the likes of JA Solar, for example, that if a solar module is taken off the roof after 3 years, there's a high risk of micro cracks that affect performance. So it's not something the bank would actually want to remove, and that adds another dimension of challenge. Then if we lastly look that, let's say we could successfully take off these assets off the roof, that the fact that there's no market for used components in South Africa, we are really hamstrung in terms of relying on a solar plant as pure collateral. And I will talk in the funding approach on how we view that, but that is the key challenge in funding solar. If we look at what the cash flow impact of a solar plant is, that is a lot easier for a bank to look at. As a business bank, we are very, very comfortable with looking at our customers' cash flows, looking at projected cash flows and forecasted cash flows, and a solar plant fits very neatly into that thinking. In addition to that, we've got our heads around the fact that there's simulations involved, and we've bought into the reliability of the simulation software such as Helioscope and PVSol. So that is an easy box for us to tick. But where we do struggle, and this is one of the ways that we've approached the market, is that the actual performance is not just determined by this simulation. It's heavily dependent on what we believe is the supplier's capability, as well as the quality of equipment that a supplier is using. So how we address that in our funding approach is, and how this actually translates, is we see a solar plant as a fixture to a property. It's no different to signage that gets put up. It's no different to building on addition to a factory. We see it in the same light. But we can't just have a simple blanket approach. Despite the value being generated only when the solar plant is built, and we don't want to remove them, we can't have this blanket approach. So because of this cash flow and the understanding of the cash flow, we now, as FNB, can fund a solar plant on property and off of property. So with an off-property approach, we are purely relying on the cash flow of the existing business, as well as the cash flow that this solar plant is adding to that business to unlock funding for this asset. But in order to do that and to include these energy savings for credit assessment purposes, we need to have comfort in the supplier. So this talks to this asset due diligence. And I'm going to unpack that in the next slide. But the supplier vetting is what provides the comfort on the performance of the actual plant. So it's all great, we've got all these simulations, but when a supplier is vetted, we've then developed comfort that we can take to the bank and actually say, this is something that can be funded because the supplier is somebody that we can trust, we can rely on this cash flow. And then secondly, and almost as important, is the component vetting piece. The fact that there's reliable components gives us comfort that a solar plant will have the longevity to survive the funding under term and beyond that for our customer. Let me look at some of these Q&A questions. So in terms of a PPA model, at the moment, we do not have a typical PPA model that we share because our PPA funding is done by First Fund. We can have a discussion with First Fund and look at assisting on draft PPA agreements, or at least some Q&As on what the PPA agreement should include. Do you give any assistance to startup businesses as you're a company specializing in hot water heating installations? So FNB does. We assist not all startup businesses, but startup businesses with up to 6 months track record can now apply for funding on our FNB app or on online banking for working capital facilities and term loan funding. So from 6 months worth of track record, we can assist startup or near startup businesses. Do you finance long-term tenants in rented buildings? Any special requirements like a landlord agreement? So we do fund long-term tenants in rented buildings on a cash flow basis. So we do not rely on the property because the property is not available. There is a caveat to that, is for exceptionally long-term agreements, we can actually rely on that agreement, but that starts to get very specialized. we will need to look at a landlord agreement. So once a project like that comes around, please reach out to me and we can have that discussion. Is there any specific brand that we prefer? So we've got a long list of approved brands of products that we like to use. But what the things we look at, and I'll talk in the next slide regarding that, Louis. Let's get to that slide, and I'll answer how we look at components and what we look for in good quality components. So as I said on the funding approach, is that 80% of, in our view, 80% of the risk sits with the supplier, and that's the installer or the EPC. The reason for that is things like regulatory risk is something that is very, very difficult to pin down, and we need to rely on the supplier to enforce that. Engineering risk and engineering capability also sits within the supplier's realm, and that is fundamental to the overall final performance of a plant. We believe that strong engineering translates very directly into performance. The components are 20% of the risk in a project, and performance there and longevity, as I discussed, are part of the process. Performance, or what we look for in strong components, to answer Louis' earlier question, is we're looking for brands that have strong track record within South Africa, that have evidence of operating within our conditions. They've got local support. It doesn't help that we have the best inverter, for example, but if there is a breakdown, it takes 6 to 8 weeks to have that inverter replaced. That starts affecting the cash flow and again affects the financing impact. So we want strong components with proof of surviving our conditions, and strong support within South Africa. Those are some of the things that we look for in FNB. So some of the components we look at modules, we look at inverters, we look at mounting brackets, and if storage is included in a non-grid type solar plant, we will look at storage as well. Then we've got two classes of our approved suppliers that address this supplier risk. This is based on transaction sizes, but it's very loosely related to the draft SANS regulations that are obviously awaiting promulgation and comment, or in comment phase. And the first one is, to start at the bottom, is our installer panel. So our installer panel is where we've realized this is where a large portion of our customers need assistance. And this due diligence is an approval. So we are allowed to approve these suppliers. My team goes through the approval process, and we look to do it as simply as possible. So we're looking for a registration with the Department of Labor, a proof of, for electrician to sign off the AC side, as well as evidence of industry training. We believe this industry needs investment, and investment in training is something we look for. So things like the P4 training is something that we definitely push for, and that is some of the evidence that we like to see when we're approving an installer for the installer panel. The EPC panel is where we start looking at engineering, and this is required for credit benefit. So this is a more enhanced type of due diligence that we do, and it's based on a rating system. So we have a team that is dedicated to doing these ratings. This team has industry experience. They are able to actually look at doing these ratings. And we look at things like track record. So track record includes projects that have been rolled out, as well as things like the P4 performance certificate that forms part of our rating matrix. We also look at track record financially. Has this business been around for a while? Is it likely that this business will be able to support this asset 5 years down the line? We look at guarantees. So what guarantees are offered on this plant? Is it just workmanship? We understand the guarantees that are offered by the components, but is there additional guarantees? Are there workmanship guarantees, performance guarantees? Those are very, very important when you're looking at trying to fund these types of assets. And again, talking to P4 as well as other skills. And here specifically, we look at training that the organization's undertaken. For example, is there a professional engineer? Is there a skilled person doing the design? And we also look, again, talking to both training and skills as well as track record. we would like to see an engineer's reference letter as one of the aspects that we look at. So I can share that EPC panel requirements after the session, or you're more than welcome to contact me. My email address is coming up, and we can take a look from there. Let's quickly look at. Apologies. Let me quickly just get into the Q&A. So in terms of storage finance, we try to link it very much to the technology. So we would like to do up to even 10 years. Again, if 10 years is possible with property collateral, with a bond over property, we can then take it from there. So happy with storage finance. We just need to have some good understanding of what the application is, and we'll work with the EPC to understand that. So we will always, as FNB, Martin, to answer your question, his questions around legislation that designs need to be signed off by PRNs or PR certified engineers. We will always meet whatever legislation is requiring. So we will also insist on that as part of our supplier due diligence, and need to get comfort on who, if an EPC does not have a professional engineer signing off designs for the required size of plant, we will specifically require that information, and it's already part of some of the things that we require is disclosing who the professional engineer is, or who the person responsible for designing these solutions is. So it's definitely on top of our agenda. So typical loan metrics, I'll answer now. Rian, we can talk to term, interest rate, and range. Lee, how do you deal with installer not gaining municipality sign-off on the SSEG, and do you require an acceptance letter before funding is given? So at the moment, we place all that reliance on track record and on the professionality of the installer. So part of our track record and comfort we derive, and some of the questions that we ask and part of the discussion is how do installers and EPCs handle the SSEG requirements. All right, I'll get to, there's quite a couple of questions popping up. Let's get through the presentation, and then I can answer the rest. So in terms of our offering to customers, and this is our view of our product, and the first one I want to talk to is enabling sustainability, and this is an important one for us as FNB business and FNB and FirstRand as a brand, is we believe that solar plants are an asset that can assist our customers in tackling the challenges of energy. And as a brand and as a business, we do feel very, very strongly that we need to assist our customers to start, run, and grow their businesses. So this you can see through some of the things that we're doing for COVID relief, the fact that you can apply for COVID relief as a business on the FNB app. Things like Fundaba, which is a business coach in your pocket. There's many solutions that FNB are offering, and this fits directly into that. And we believe solar plant funding is fundamentally key to assisting our customers grow and survive in a post-COVID world as well as in a pre-COVID world. Nothing has changed. From a property and a non-property approach, just to recap, if property is available as collateral for our customer, that allows us to do as much as possible. Because solar plants are a property fixture in our view, it allows us to unlock up to 10 years worth of funding. If the property is not able to be included as part of the collateral package, and we have to structure debt outside of that, and there's a non-property approach, that's a 5 to 7 year funding, depending on the strength of the customer. We believe as FNB that we have a strong understanding of these assets, but we're not against learning from industry and shaping with industry. That's why we see ourselves continually developing our involvement with the key associations, which AREP is one of them, as well as SAPIA. We feel that as a big commercial lender, as a big bank in South Africa, we can play a key part in driving the strategy of these assets in the country. We offer what we believe to be competitive pricing. If we take a property approach, the pricing is always better when property collateral is involved. We can be at a rate of about prime. For certain customers, it could even be below prime. And then when there's a non-property approach, unfortunately, it does get more expensive. And there we could go to prime plus 2 or 3, depending again on, it's very risk dependent on who the customer is that is applying for the debt. As we discussed, we believe that the supplier due diligence is a strong offering to our customers. Our customers understand their key businesses. So if you're talking to an agri business or an agricultural business, he knows his winery, for example. He doesn't understand, or she doesn't understand, the implications of a solar plant from a regulatory perspective, from a quality of component perspective, or quality of supply perspective. So we really do believe in what we're trying to do in the supplier due diligence piece, and that's very, very key as part of our offering. Then the solar plant credit benefit, as I discussed earlier, is that we include the credit benefit of a solar plant. We take a look at those simulations, and we can actually include them in our credit assessment. So we maximize the amount of funding we can give to a customer for their solar plant. And then lastly, you've got this full funding package, but without key insurance, and these assets are really something that need to be insured separately and have their own specific set of risk criteria. FNB, through our insurance brokers, has a set of insurance products that can assist with performance guarantees, can assist with theft, all the other aspects that are present for a solar plant. So in a nutshell, this is the FNB offering, and we can unpack them. You're more welcome again to contact me to unpack and discuss. So in terms of how to get in touch with us and how we refer, how we look at having EPCs and installers refer business to us, as well as customers bringing transactions and requesting assistance. Firstly, a supplier still remains, just because it's a FNB funded project, the supplier is still responsible for delivering the project, all the assistance and support as per their agreed terms. Just because it's an FNB funded installation or project doesn't mean any of that changes. And then also, just because it's an FNB business customer, the customer still remains responsible for all the funding and supply requirements. So if there is a service level agreement, an SLA for operations and maintenance, to have the warranties in place, there's an expectation of the customer to meet any requirements that the supplier has. And there needs to be a clear understanding between supplier and customer. FNB is purely a funder in this space, although we do take responsibility for the vetting. We don't expect our customers and the suppliers to enter into an agreement with us per se, apart from our customers signing a facility agreement, obviously. Where FNB Alternative Energy plays is we're a single point of contact for industry. We look to be what we like to term a center of excellence within the bank for this industry, and we want to be a single point of contact for industry. So if there's any questions from industry, any discussions that need to be taken, my email address is kyle.durham@fnb.co.za, and then we will assist your customer as well as yourself through the process of vetting, as well as the fulfillment of the transaction. And that brings to a close the formal presentation. So I'll get to answering some of these questions, and you're welcome to follow in with me in the Q&A box. Is the Molelekwa, apologies for my pronunciation, is the funding only on the solar panel installations, and what is the take on small micro businesses? So as part of FNB, we want to grow micro businesses. It's a very important part of our industry. So we will look, as part of currently our funding that we've just discussed is for solar panel installations, but we do not discriminate on our installer panel regarding the size of the business doing these installations. and even micro businesses with the requisite training and that can have projects funded by FNB. Is there a strategy in FNB to consolidate all the different product class offerings? We're currently talking to commercial, home loans, Westbank, RMB, and First Fund. So as part of the FNB and First Rand approach, these internal changes that are happening, we are adjusting. Our outbound brands will remain, but internally we've already started working a lot closer, and I personally work with all those that are being that you've spoken about across the various areas. Vessel, contact me and let's have a discussion and just make sure that we're not dropping the ball there. Tumelo's asked, does FNB recognize PV Green Card as part of the vetting process? Definitely. In our FNB installer panel, it's one of our recognized evidence of training. It's something that we look to very favorably, and it's also included in the P4, which Carl will talk to. So there is benefit on both sides, and it's something that we would like to see a lot of EPCs and installers go for. Will you fund long-term solar rentals, e.g. 10-year rental contract? Thus fund me as a business on a project where I sell the solar output directly to a user like a factory. I own the equipment for 10 years during the bank loan and a 10-year warranty on the product. This way, we as a business can finance the units by the bank on the cost prices and make our money on the long term. That's the question from Michael. So Michael, that's very much similar to, in our mind, to a power purchase agreement, and that'll definitely be done by First Fund, and I can assist you with talking directly to First Fund. Altulide has asked, are you supporting EMEs to register and qualify as installers? I did answer that. We, particularly on the installer base, if there's evidence of training and you've got your Department of Labour registration, we will definitely look at approving you to fund an FNB customer. Are you having a capacity to support SMMEs and EMEs to do project plans and finalize with clients? I think I've answered that. Okay. I have solar PV in my house. How do I get funding, particularly when it comes to maintenance? The guy who did installation doesn't do maintenance, so I'm on my own. So the funding, once it's done, I would still look at doing, would still look at tackling that using my home loan, and I'm not sure in terms of maintenance. It's something you could perhaps reach out to another company. Vessels has asked, with yield insurance available, is this something that FNB will look positively as far as it's reducing the risk and therefore more relaxed terms? Vessel, definitely. That is something we see very, very positively, and it's something we would like to see across the industry. Edwin for Mark, I use Nedbank mainly for the funding of my clients' renewable energy projects, which include diesel generators and PV plants. Will FNB have a similar approach where clients have direct access to your facility? Definitely, we've got the same approach. We will look to fund the whole project, and we'll definitely tackle it from there. Theo Beekes has asked, how and where do I apply for an application in the residential sector? So at the moment, there isn't a dedicated funding product in this residential sector. What I would suggest you do is get hold of your banker, or get hold of the person responsible for your account and talk to them about having your home loan extended. Trevor, I will definitely share the list of FNB approved components. It is a changing list, so perhaps reach out to me and I'll share that with you. And some of the criteria. The best is once you've got a quotation, we can start looking at that. We will look at doing heat pumps and gensets as well, as I answered a little bit earlier. It's for the full approach. Do you have any list of approved trading providers? So it's ad hoc at the moment, but we will be developing that and can share that to industry in time. We haven't got a list approved trading providers as yet. Currently, the two we look at very favorably is the SAPIA PV Green Card, as well as the AREP P4 certification. Will FNB consider smaller projects below 250,000 Rand? Generally, those get a bit challenging as they get a bit expensive for our customers. But let's take a look at how many there are, and perhaps we can assist Jay. Let's take it from there. Lexus Barwise has asked, is lightning risk mitigation a prerequisite for higher lightning prone areas? We place this risk very much within our installers and our EPCs, and that's why we look for training and look for Department of Labor registration and all the other things I discussed. So that for me lies very, very clearly in the supplier area. Nicholas from Skullfake has asked, what is the uptake of making use of this FNB financing, and what was success or approval rate? It's been incredible. FNB hasn't really gone out to market. This is one of our first talking engagements. We've been a very long pilot and development phase, and it's been very, very strong. We've seen a lot of our customers wanting these assets, and I think our customers are getting more and more understanding of these assets. Ruben has asked, can FNB finance an installer company to in turn lease their plant to their customers and service their debt for monthly lease payments? So Ruben, contact me. We can assist an installer company, provided there's certain aspects, but this falls within normal finance. It's not a renewable energy specific finance, and this starts to lie more into the first fund aspect. William, would FNB be interested in integrated cryptocurrency in the solar credit, alternative credit? That's something we can look at the moment. There's no clear position from First Rand. There's a clear position, apologies, from First Rand on cryptocurrency. And as First Rand, we've come out quite publicly and said that cryptocurrency is something that we're skeptical of. There's been press releases that have gone out on that. So it would depend on a wider aspect. Doug has asked, for what debt service cover do you look for in C&I projects to be funded? So Doug, we look at a global debt service cover ratio of the customer, not on a project only. So we generally at about over 1 times, obviously, and preferably closer to 1.2 times. But again, depending on the customer, it's very risk dependent. Will you fund expansions on existing systems? Ron, definitely we will. Does FNB have a typical PPA to share? Not yet, and because we're not really funding PPAs directly, so we would look towards First Fund to issue something there, and I will have that discussion with the team. With home loans, if there's anything retail specific, I suggest you have a discussion with your banker. You might need to make a new loan if your home loan is paid up. I'm not 100% sure. We've discussed funding projects outside of South Africa. At the moment, this is very much South Africa based, but please contact me if you've got outside of South Africa installations that need funding where First Rand has a presence, and let's see if we can assist. Derek has asked, will FNB setting up a database? Yes, that's part of the approved supplier process. Once you've been approved, you're approved, and it gets reviewed on a yearly basis. Do you have a rate sheet available? Tian, unfortunately not. You can work on some of the ranges that I work with. I would suggest in your proposals around about prime to prime plus 2, and if it still works at prime plus 2, the customer can only expect better. These questions are starting to pile up. For solar plant for embedded generation, do I need to own the land? That was answered in the presentation. No, we can fund across both. We would prefer that you do own the property though. Where does one apply to be vetted? You can contact me on my email address. Carl will share that out. You're more than welcome to. So on the property approach, Rangani has asked, whose property is this and what are you looking at? the client receiving the installation, or the installer business's property. So it's the client receiving the installation. So these are for turnkey projects where the customer has owned the asset. William, I'm not 100% sure on your question. Perhaps just rephrase and just pop it in later. So Nicholas, has asked, does FNB engage with the installer supply in any way after the funding has been awarded, or will FNB take any responsibility for the system and its operation? So FNB doesn't take any responsibility for the system and its operation. That's with our customer, and the customer is responsible to talk directly to the installer. So Aubrey, we look at the company's cash flows as well as we add the benefit. So Aubrey's asked us, you mentioned that funding looks at company's revenue rather than the savings generated by the systems. Is this correct? So there is no debt service cover requirement for savings versus repayment of the loan. So we look at it globally. So if a customer is producing X amount of debt service cover or EBITDA, we add the cash flow benefit to the customer, not the cash flow benefit of the customer, the cash flow benefit of the solar project on top of his existing cash flows, and we get a global debt service cover number. So the solar plant does definitely add benefit to their debt service cover. Can non-FNB clients apply for finance? So at the moment, it's for FNB clients, preferably or more comfortably, it's for FNB customers that bank transactionally with FNB. So Alexi has asked for CNI projects, say 1 megawatt AC. Does FNB get involved with drafting of EPC and O&M contracts between clients and borrower? And does FNB use a long-term agreement to sign off the project? So again, this falls very much within our customers' area of expertise, that they need to have their own legal opinion and comfort. We merely suggest and have our own facility agreement. So there is a definite, we are only the funder to these installations. So I'm just going through these questions. I see there's a couple more in the chat. Let me just get to those, and then we can.
Yeah, Kyle, I think the interaction has been very good, and I think the questions that have been asked have been very good and applicable and relevant to the topic being discussed.
Definitely, Carl. I've been very surprised with the interaction, and that it's been great. Please, anyone's more than welcome to contact me and reach out to me on email, and we'll try to answer as many questions and assist the industry. And I think if there's any questions afterwards, I'll stay on the call and we can chat through them afterwards. I'll monitor the Q&A and perhaps answer some privately.
Kyle, I think have you run through the questions? I don't know whether there are any more outstanding questions.
I think I've answered most of them. I'll answer them. I'll spend some time on the call now afterwards and just type an answer to those that I might not have got to, that I've missed. Let's maybe crack on with your presentation.
Yeah, I think there will be some more time after I've presented to ask some more questions. There is a favor I want to ask you. In your Q&A box, after you've answered the question, after you've ticked that you answer live, there's another box behind it that says done. Once you've clicked on done, it actually removes the question and it moves it into an answered box. So it makes it easy to filter through the questions that are still open.
Okay, perfect. I'll do that now.
We have had, thanks, Kyle. Thank you very much. Thanks for your presentation. So I'm going to continue with the the P4 presentation, just to give a bit of an overview on P4 and what it is. And then after my presentation, I'm happy to take some calls on quality assurance. And what was the other thing? Qualifications. In other words, what do you need to be in order to do solar installations? Are there new qualifications? What's the process? How far is it in being developed? And those kind of questions we'd be happy to answer after the presentation. So I'm quickly going to share my screen. Let me just see where I am in screens. Okay, guys, you should be able to see my screen at the moment, and what we've covered the slide and the information contained in it already. So the problem that we've got in the market is that we've got thousands of guys that are busy approaching the sector, and currently less than 25%, and I'm going to use a tool to just show where it is in the presentation I'm busy presenting. Less than 25% of guys that are currently attending solar courses are electricians. That means that 75% of guys approaching the solar sector are currently not necessarily trained to be installers. There is, of course, the possibility that a large number of guys attending the courses are actually interested in the information because they want to start up businesses. They might be interested in the information. So we've got a lot of chartered accountants attending solar courses, specifically because they want to invest into the sector. We've got a lot of homeowners attending courses, not because they want to install systems, but because they want to understand that the system that is being installed or sold to them is a system that they actually need, and that they are not being sold equipment that has not been designed or assigned properly. We estimate that somewhere between 5,000 and 10,000 general contractors have done installations. So we've got a lot of installations in the market that may have not been done by qualified electricians. The solar PV technology falls under the electrical regulations, and that means that if you want to install solar PV legally, you have to be a trade-tested electrician registered with the Department of Labor. Each solar installation that you do, you are supposed to have a certificate of compliance issued for that particular installation. So in order to ensure that we've got designs that have been properly done, installations that are compliant, the only way to do this is to use a quality assurance program. In industry at the moment, there are only two quality assurance programs. It's either the PV Green Card or the P4 platform. Someone asked a question earlier on, and maybe now would be the right time for me to answer that question. I don't know where that question has disappeared to. Someone wanted to know what's the difference between AREP and SAPVIA. Essentially, they are two different industry bodies. So we've got lots of different industry bodies. AREP is one of them. AREP is short for the Association for Renewable Energy Practitioners. And we've got SAPVIA, which is the South African PV Industry Association. Two completely separate industry bodies, and each body has a different quality assurance program. These programs I call feel-good programs, because essentially when you arrive at a customer's house, you show them that you are associated with one or other organization, and you show them your qualification, which would either be one of the two quality assurance programs, and the customer feels good, hence feel-good program. So it is true that we need to use qualified electricians, and it is true that we need to use electrical engineers to have our design signed off. Those rules the rules for who signs off a design varies from municipality to municipality. So in Cape Town, for example, you have to have each and every installation signed off by an engineer that is connected to the grid. Whereas in Gauteng with City Power, you'd be able to get away with systems smaller than 30 kilowatts, where you don't need an engineer to sign off the installation. So different rules apply for different municipal regions. But just because a guy is an electrical engineer doesn't mean that he knows anything about solar technology. In one of the courses that we presented a while ago, I had a lady in the course, and she had a doctorate in electroluminescence. Electroluminescence is one of the tests, one of the final tests you do when your solar module or your solar panel has been assembled. So she had a doctorate in electroluminescence, but she didn't know how to put two panels together. So even though we could have electricians that are registered with the Department of Labor, it doesn't mean that the electrician know anything about solar. We could have engineers. I've spoken to engineers that are highly trained, educated, and experienced in high voltage lines for Eskom's electrical infrastructure, which is great for their field of expertise, but they have no idea what goes on in solar. So we could have personnel that are extremely well trained, but know nothing about solar. And that is exactly where quality assurance programs bridge the gap. So the idea behind a quality assurance program is that you'll get an installer, salesman, or engineer to participate in the quality assurance program, and that will give the customer the satisfaction or the feel-good factor that the person that is involved in the installation knows what they are talking about. I am going to reserve questions towards the end. Carl, there's an assessment for installers, which is great, but how are engineers being assessed? So thank you very much for the question. And yes, I think salespeople need to be assessed, installers need to be assessed, engineers need to be assessed. And for this, we have quality assurance programs. The P4 platform makes provision for each and every level of person in the industry. So I've covered user confidence, I've covered personal and business growth. So when you've got staff working for you that have passed some form of quality assurance program, you as a business owner do have some level or some means to gauge the knowledge of your employees. So it is important to understand which of your employees know what they're talking about and which employees should ideally still attend some form of training. On this slide, we see the P4 platform is the only solar PV quality assurance program that addresses the full value chain of the solar PV sector. So it doesn't matter whether you sell, develop, design, install, operate, or maintain. The P4 platform has a test that will satisfy the requirements for your specific field of interest. So it makes provision for sales teams, developers, installers, engineers, and all maintenance crew. The P4 platform is essentially split into two sections. The one section covers individuals, and the other section covers businesses. So if you are an individual and you just want to test your own knowledge, you are welcome to write the P4 test, and that then will give you a gauge of your theoretical knowledge of solar as a technology. Whereas for businesses, we've got a section within the P4 platform that identifies the risk of a business, the risk of doing business with an installer. So as a customer, you've got a system that you want to have installed. You've got an installer that claims to be a specialist. He claims to have done lots of installations, but he might have done a lot of installations, but maybe they weren't done correctly. So the P4 platform has a performance certificate specifically geared for businesses, where it looks at who the guys are working inside this business, what are their respective levels of experience, what have they gained in terms of knowledge and experience for solar PV systems. It looks at which systems have been installed by the business in question and what do the customers think of this business. The performance certificate gives the business a score, and the score determines what the risk value is for doing business with that particular company or organization. On this slide, we can see what the risk scoring looks like. Companies that have gone through the process get a score, and the score essentially weighs them either in the gray zone or the safe zone. If you do end up doing solar installations and you are just going to start off in industry, it's possible for you to start off in the gray zone. The gray zone says the guys that are involved in this team have sufficient knowledge, but they might not have gained any experience as being part of the industry. So you could have different guys leaving larger installer organizations and starting up a new business. We see that regularly. And then that new business will fall into the gray zone. And yeah, so the P4 platform is the fastest growing quality assurance platform in South Africa. There might be some of you saying, but what's the difference between the PV Green Card and the P4 platform? I think, first of all, the PV Green Card is geared specifically for installers. As part of the PV Green Card, you've got a theoretical assessment and you've got a practical assessment. And it's geared specifically towards the installer. So there's a gap in what that platform offers for salespeople, for example, or for engineers. You don't necessarily, not all engineers want to be installers. But an engineer still wants to be recognized for their level of knowledge and their level of experience in industry. So the P4 platform makes provision for that through either the level 2 or the level 3 tests. Oh yes, as a closing note, the P4 level 1 online test has been written in more than 14 countries. So we do see the platform gaining momentum in other countries, and we see a lot of neighboring countries showing interest in the P4 platform. So the P4 platform, although being developed in South Africa, we see it gaining a lot of interest internationally. Okay, guys, I would like to stop the presentation there. If there are any questions or answers, I'd be happy to answer them now. Richard says, I see you are linked to the ECB. Richard, I find the industry in the past has been a fractured industry. So we see a lot of organizations that are each fighting in their own little corner. And I think it's important for industry to start working together. So we are forming strategic relationships with other industry bodies because we feel that the industry should be growing, and the only way to grow this industry is by working together instead of each organization just fighting in their own corner. There was someone else who also asked a question about the difference between AREP and Sapphire. I do believe that Sapphire is very much involved in driving policy and lobbying with government. AREP, we don't really get involved with government. We have participated in some of the government initiatives, and that's about it. We don't necessarily visit ministers. We have no real interest in lobbying with government or changing any policies. We try to focus on the small-scale embedded generation market, and I think there's a lot that needs to be done. And then Lee says they still require the sign on the SSEG from a PRN. Okay, Lee, that's very good. Maybe it's still some of the changes that they are busy implementing. I was at a presentation where Paul Vermeulen from City Power presented about I don't know, 3 months ago, and there Paul indicated that from 30 kilowatts downwards, they do not require sign-off by PRN. I'm assuming that might still be in the pipeline. Jan Steenkamp says, I'm a qualified electrician with Wyman's license and registered with Manpower. How can I get myself qualified to do installations? Jan, theoretically, you are already qualified. There are those two platforms, so you can either go online and you can write your P4 level 1 test through a registration portal on the association's website. That is what I would recommend. But qualified to do installations, your qualification and solar installations all fall under the same electrical installation regulations. So theoretically, you are already qualified to do installations. The only thing I would do is just get myself trained in the technology. There are quite a few things that you need to know that's different with solar that doesn't necessarily apply to the average electrical installation. Louis says, are there any training institutions that you would approve for electricians? There are quite a few training institutions. I think what you rather need to look at is, first of all, how much you've got to spend on training from a money point of view, and how much time you've got to spend on training from a timing point of view. So first of all, how many days do you want to set out for training, and what can you afford? There are 3 or 4 training institutions nationally that I think do most of the training. Louis, you are welcome to send me an email. I'm happy to share the names of all the training institutions, and you can then decide which one is more applicable for your respective region, or which one is more applicable for what you want to achieve. Edwin says, there's a huge risk in having these candidates that are not qualified electricians. How are AREP and SAPIA going to regulate these individuals? So, Edwin, that's a good question. It is a massive risk, but there's nothing you can really do to regulate it. I don't believe that it's possible to really regulate the market down to that point or down to that level. If you have a look at the ECA and the ECB, 2 electrical bodies that have been lobbying with industry to try and get the standard of installations down to 1 standard. Some of those organizations were founded in, I don't know, the 70s or before the 70s. I kind of hinted at when the ECA started a couple of months ago at an event, and I got it completely wrong. So the ECA has been around for, I don't know, more than 70 years. And I don't think they have been successful in eradicating poor quality installations. So how are we going to regulate these individuals? I don't know whether it's possible to regulate it. The best way to do it is for industry to start working together and beating the same drum as far as standards are concerned. If you go to do a quote, make sure that the customers or the contractors that are quoting against you are either carry a P4 platform certificate or carry a PV green card. So I would start promoting the platforms that are available in the market and raising awareness with customers. So when you go to a customer, you should ask the customer whether the other guys that are quoting is part of an industry body, are they registered with the Department of Labor, and almost, I think it's time for industry to start accepting the responsibility of improving the quality of installations by raising awareness with customers. Then Edwin says, I have found many people installing PV systems that are not registered with the Department of Labor or have a wireman's license. Absolutely, I see this and I get feedback on this problem, and I'll go as far as calling it a problem daily, on a daily basis. So I don't think you should rely on industry associations to tackle it. I would like to take that question and throw it back at industry and say, well, guys, when is industry going to start accepting the responsibility and start beating the drum with customers? So when you go to the customer, insist, tell the customer, inform them about the regulations, that there has to be a COC. Inform them that it could affect their insurance cover if they don't have a COC. Inform them that they need to ensure that the guy that does the installation do certain things to a certain standard. In other words, promote the standard to which you are busy doing installations, because those are the guys that are busy competing against your projects. Nkonzo says, I'm a registered electrician. Nkondo says, I'm a registered electrician with over 10 megawatt peak installations, but neither P4 or PV green card. Do I have to start at level 1? Nkonzo, yes. So the level 1 is, first of all, the test is free of charge and it's online. You are stuck at home at the moment, so you might just as well register for the test, and you're welcome to do it. You're welcome to do it while you are in lockdown. Shane has been answered. Saki says, is the P4 training accredited with the Engineering Council? Okay, so the P4 platform is just a quality assurance platform. You can do training through different institutions, and you'll find that with the different institutions, the training offered by those guys might be registered with the Engineering Council. So the P4 platform itself is AREP is a body like the Engineering Council is, and AREP has its own quality assurance program. Richard said, how are they going to monitor the already installed illegal systems? Yeah, Richard, I'm sorry. Unfortunately, I don't think there are guys that can monitor it. We are moving to the point where the insurance bodies are becoming the regulator, and you'll find that if a customer has done an illegal installation and something goes wrong in his installation, it gets struck by lightning or there's a surge and equipment get damaged, then the first question the insurance will ask is, where's your COC? Or if there is a COC, they will do an inspection at the property and try and see whether there was surge arresters installed and try to determine whether there's a reason for the insurance body to not pay out the claim. If you do engineering and Marilena says, if you do engineering and procurement and subcontract installation, but would like P4 accreditation, how does the process work? Marilena, it all starts with level 1. So you start with level 1, and in response to your level 1 registration, you can mention that you want to do the performance certificate, and we'll guide you through the process. William says, where can one do this P4 certification? William, it might be better for you to send me an email. You can send me an email. You don't necessarily need to participate at a specific training center. So if you are an installer and you've got the experience, like one of the previous guys who asked the question, if you've got the experience and you've gone through previous training sessions and you believe you've got the requisite knowledge, then register and write a test and see whether you qualify. How do I get the... So Noble, I think I have answered your question as well. Mamoloto. Mamoloto, if you have not received your certificate, please send us an email. You are also welcome to give us a call. Obviously, while we are presenting, it might be better to just send an email. Salo says, are you looking at biogas? Salo, at the moment, no, just solar PV. Sayed says, is there a limitation of size or value of installation that can be financed? Carl, that's a question for you. Let me just run through these quickly. Willem says, who are approved training centers? Willem, at the moment, there are only two. It's either PQRS or Sun Cybernetics. There are two training institutions that are currently offering training that are linked to the P4 platform, and that's either PQRS or Sun Cybernetics. Both of those training institutions offer training throughout the country. So you should be able to find a training center or training venue close to you. How does AREP view foreign certificates from SEI in the USA? No, unfortunately, Edward, seeing that that some of the tests on the P4 platform is free of charge, we don't view any other qualifications in any other way. You've got to pass the test. So if you've got a qualification, you should be able to easily pass the tests. Gerard says, can the high level of tests be completed online? The high level of tests will be available online soon. We've got a couple of challenges as far as the first and second attempts are concerned. So we are just sorting out those, and then they will be available online. Jans has been answered. Bram says, if a PV installer stops doing installations and do not connect it to the existing AC network, does that PV installer still need to be an electrician? Or could an electrician do the final connection between the PV and the AC? So Bram, theoretically, that's a bit of a loaded question, and I've now got to tread carefully. So if you look at the regulation, you have to either be a qualified electrician or be employed by a qualified electrician and work under the supervision of a registered electrician. So to answer your question based on what the regulation says, it says that a PV installer theoretically has to work under the supervision of a registered electrician and be in his employment. That is not necessarily how industry works. In industry, we see a lot of guys doing installations and then just paying electricians to connect the AC. So I understand what the regulation says, and I understand what's busy happening in industry. Trevor says, can you kindly talk to us about the costs for all the levels in the P4 platform? Trevor, at this stage, level 1 is free of charge. Depending on when level 2 becomes live, it may be free of charge for a short period of time. So the costs, we really try to keep the costs down to a minimum. The idea behind the platform is that it's supposed to be for the benefit of industry. So at this stage, you can still be a free member with AREP. That's the idea behind the association. So membership is free of charge, and the level 1 for now is also free of charge. I'm not sure for how long the different levels are going to be free of charge. If you write a level 1 test in a classroom environment, it's 500 Rand. If you write it online, it's free of charge. The level 2 in a classroom environment is probably going to be 750 Rand. So online, there will also be a difference. Then Bram says, why does an electrical engineer need to sign off small household installation under 15 kVA? Bram, I don't really have an answer for you. The municipalities have bylaws And in their bylaws, they determine what the qualification or the minimum qualification is for guys that participate in their municipal area. So it's really in the city of Cape Town area, the rules and the bylaws are different to the city power in Joburg. So William says a massive public awareness program, do not do DIY installations. They potentially can kill a person or burn down their homes. Yes, William, absolutely. DC is not something you should be playing with. And I think that's why FNB is trying to link their funding to quality assurance platforms. It's just another level of assurance that reduces their risk as a financier. Jean says, is there membership fee once you join AREP? No. I'm not sure whether there will ever be a membership fee. There will always be a free level. And then Konzo says, I'm a registered electrician. Is it compulsory to start at level 1? Nkonzo, I'm going to answer you again, and I'm going to say yes. Level 1 is where you start. If you pass level 1, then you can worry about all the other levels. Let's start with level 1. Will these qualifications and registrations be required for insurance of PV plants? I think eventually, yes. For now, it's not necessarily required by all insurance companies, but we will get to the point where it will become a requirement. Etienne says, I'm a Red Seal qualified, but do not have a wireman's license. So Etienne, you are a trade-tested electrician, so you are allowed to do electrical installations, if I understand the regulations correctly, under the supervision of a registered electrician. So the under supervision is a bit of a grey area. Please do yourself a favor and have your business registered as an electrical contractor with the Department of Labour. Willem says, I don't think it's the association's responsibility to regulate the industry. It's the responsibility of the Department of Labour to regulate the industry. Yeah. So the Department of Labour, I think, is really trying to do their level best to try and monitor quality of installations, but I don't think we should lay the responsibility at the door of government to do it. I don't know whether we've got any government officials participating today, but to be quite honest, I think they've got enough stuff to keep themselves busy with. It's going to be easier for industry to monitor and control and lobby better quality installations. Then I see we've got Peter on the line as well. Hi, Peter. Thanks for saying hello. Martin, Martin says, as far as I know, the installer with his installation electrician can issue a COC when the facility has an existing valid COC. Thank you very much. This is an important point that the installer must be aware of. Thanks, Martin. Very, very, very important point. Before you can issue a COC on the solar installation, you need to understand that you must have a valid COC for the rest of the installation. You can't just issue a part COC on a house that is not compliant. So you can't just issue a part COC for the solar system on a house that has an electrical installation that's non-compliant. Jay says the problem is that some COCs are in place but are not valid. Yes, Jay, good point. I think it's important for electricians to raise this, but this is something that has to be done by the electrician. Thanks, Edwin. I'm glad you're finding the information useful. Peter then says, hi, Carl, I fully agree. All organizations need to work together to build on the transparency, promote the standards in industry and clients in the industry. Guys, it's the only way we're going to get this, we're going to get the standard up and we're going to get the industry to work. William says, can you go to the website? Yes, William, you can. If you can't find it, please send me an email. FNB will also ask for a COC. Absolutely, Louis, quite correct. Which is interesting, if you have a system insured, you will always work, you will always find that the insurers and the financiers will try to reduce their risk as far as possible. So COC is definitely going to form part of the paperwork, quite correct, Louis. Willem says, what happens if you don't pass the test? Can you rewrite again? Willem, you can rewrite again, but the first attempt is free of charge. We've got a bit of an issue in processing the second attempt at the moment. So we've had more than 1,000 guys over the last year write the P4 test, and we've got a bit of a bottleneck as far as the second attempts are concerned. So if you don't pass it the first time, oh, here's an interesting point. If you don't pass the test the first time, you've got to wait 7 days before you write it again. And this is to prevent guys from writing and failing and writing and failing and writing and failing and writing and failing just for the sake of trying to pass the test. Once you have failed the test 3 times, you will not be allowed to write the test again until you've attended a course. If you fail the test 3 times after having attended a course, you will not be able to write again until you can provide evidence that you've been part of a couple of installations. So there is a quality assurance process. Peter, you are going to have to, Peter wants to know when is the level 3 training later on this year. Peter, if I had a crystal ball, I would be able to give you lots of other answers as well. I don't know. I don't know when the lockdown's going to end. So for now, everything's online. Jan Steenkamp says, can you please send us the website link? Yes, Jan, I'll send you the links to the website. James says, I see there's no regulatory body regarding wind energy for private installations. Would AREP consider doing this as well? James, so AREP is Association for Renewable Energy Practitioners, and I think the idea is to have an organization that is flexible. If there is someone that can drive that part of the organization, then I don't see why AREP wouldn't be able to expand on their mandate. Petrus says, how do I become an AREP member? Petrus, I will send you a link as part of the link that will contain this recording. I will send a link that will also contain, I will send the links that will contain the various, access to the various parts of the website. And solar system, but not qualified electrician. So Ben wants to know, what if the person who installs the PV has a certificate on solar system, but not a qualified electrician? Ben, unfortunately, it then just means that you know how to do solar, but you're not a qualified electrician. So unfortunately, according to the regulation, theoretically, you're not allowed to issue COCs. You're not allowed to do solar installations without having a qualified electrician supervising your work. If I put it, if I water it down a bit. Ian says, where do we find the online registration forms? I'll send that to you. I'll include it in the document. How does a PV green card compare with P4? I think to be quite honest, I think the P4 and the PV green card are 2 completely separate animals. The PV green card doesn't really cater for storage. P4 makes provision for storage. I would say the PV green card has a lot more electrical theory in the questions than the P4 necessarily. P4 caters more specifically towards solar technology. Mojalefe said he just lost audio. Okay, Mojalefe, I'm sorry. Walter says the reason why electrical engineer must sign off is because they want to do an IPP and send it back to the grid. No, Walter, not necessarily in any municipality. In fact, most municipalities, you need a PRH to sign off. Louis, I'll send the links. Self-regulate or get regulated. To self-regulate is better. Quite correct, Tian. Yeah, that's of course a very valid point. Oh my goodness, and these questions just keep on coming. We've still got 15 questions in the queue and I can't seem to be working through them fast enough. Richard says, when a client sells his house with a solar system, he would need a COC. Quite correct. Thanks, Richard. Up to what? So Brahm says, as an installer, to what level P4 does one need to go? Brahm, I would say at least level 2. With level 2, you would be able to get a card from the association that would be similar to a credit card that you can show a customer when you arrive at their site. So the level 2, as far as I'm concerned, will definitely cover that. Level 1 is important and should be noted that it's not that easy to pass. Lots of qualified electricians fail first time. Thanks, Russell. That's quite correct, guys. About 60% of only about 60% of solar installers actually pass level 1. So guys that do solar installations for a living, only 60% of them pass level 1. Is the COC of a solar system different than the conventional one? But yes, not the COC is not different. So the certificate of compliance is the same. Your test report is different. So the tests you do on a solar system is different than the tests you do on a normal electrical installation. Kensani, I'll provide the email address. So for a PV system, you'll issue it as an addition. Yes, in Conzo, you issue an additional, you issue a COC for an alternative energy installation or for an alternative supply. What happens when the existing installation does not have a valid COC? It means that you need to issue a valid COC for the existing installation, and that's obviously going to have an additional cost. Let me see, Edwin. Edwin says that there are other companies that charge for PQRS training. Are these in line with the quality assurance process? So Edwin, so far, that's a bit of a PQRS question. PQRS is completely different to AREP, but I'll answer your question quickly. We do have agreements with some of the training, some of the other organizations, like we've got an organization in Durban that wants to present PQRS courses. They go through the full training process. Currently, we're still training up their presenters, and we've got an organization in George, and then we've got one in Pretoria as well, that are currently being trained and are interested in presenting PQRS courses in their region. So those courses will definitely be in line with the quality assurance process. Shane says, not sure if this is the correct platform to mention this, but their company offers free online webinar training for installers. Wow, Shane, that's interesting. Maybe you can share it. That would be nice. I would be interested to see what it covers as well. Derek says, thanks for the informative presentation. It's a pleasure, Derek. Henry says, is the AREP membership for the installer business or for each individual in the business? Henry, the platform, so the association has taken years to develop, and because it's taken so long to develop, we have made sure that it covers every single, well, most, what's the word, instances in industry. So it has a space for individuals and it has a space for businesses. Doesn't matter what your needs are. It's possible to tailor it for your company. Mamaloto says, what if a government department specifies that the bidder must be registered with SAPVIA and some bidders have AREP? Can they lodge an appeal if disqualified? I would actually mention it at the tender meeting. So when you have the tender meeting, make a mention to the organization that is in charge, the consultants, that would typically be the consultants for the organization. Tell them that, that there is another body and that you are linked to the other body and not the one that's currently being requested. That's unfortunately something that has to be done on a level by level or a case by case basis. Jacques says, Carl, what's the difference between P4 and SSP? So P4, so Solar Specialist Platform, and the P4 platform is the same platform, but you become a Solar Specialist. Maybe I should clarify that. Under the P4 platform, you can become a Solar Specialist. So the P4 platform will be geared towards the company, and the Solar Specialist would be focused on the individual. Part of the same platform, just different elements of the same platform. Bram says, if my company is registered with DOL, does it need to be registered as a solar PV installation company as well? There's no requirement, so you don't necessarily have to be registered anywhere other than with the Department of Labor. Would be nice if you could be a member of AREP, or if you feel the need to be part of any other organization. Guys, you become members with associations because they add value. Itolida says, is there material to help prepare or study for the tests? Unfortunately not. There's a framework, and the framework tells you what you need to know. So you can go and do a bit of self-study once you know what it is that you need to be able to pass. Rakesh says, Rakesh, in fact, gave Kyle's email address, Rakesh, so yes, that's the correct email address. Floyd says, does AREP have any association with African Rainbow Energy and Power? No, unfortunately not. We just happen to share the same acronym. Did AREP contact EXA to add solar engineering? No, we are not too involved with the Engineering Council of South Africa. Peter says the COC test report templates for solar installations will be released this year under SANS 10142 Part 1 Edition 3. Thanks, Peter. That's quite correct. We're looking forward to that being done. And then Mohammed says, how does one prepare for the P4 test? Could you perhaps provide a typical example? Mohammed, on the association site, there's a framework of what's being asked in the test. You can go through it and familiarize yourself with the content. Ruben says, if you're an installer company under the supervision of a qualified electrician and you discover that there are faults that need to be corrected, how do you incorporate such costs in your initial quote? I think that's something that you've got to cover with the customer before you start the solar PV installation. And then Ian just says, thanks. Guys, we've had a total of 136 questions. That is a crazy number of questions. Kyle, are you still in the presentation? I see we still have very close to 200 people that are signed in. At the peak of the presentation, we had about 300 people signed in. So you are quite a resilient bunch. Kyle, are you there?
Yeah, I am. No, thanks everyone. I appreciate the time, and Carl, thanks for setting this up, and thanks for the association as well.
Excellent. Carl, thank you very much. I'm not sure whether there were any other questions related to financing. It doesn't look like it. So I think that's great. I think we can conclude the presentation for today. Carl, thank you very much for the time and effort in presenting the FNB solution. Thanks to Peter and the ECB for participating in making it and promoting the event. Guys, thank you very much. I think I'm going to end the meeting now. Thank you for your time and thanks for participating in the event.